All right. Collectively known as the class of COVID-19, the student authors I'm about to introduce are simultaneously the most talked about, and yet in some ways the most underappreciated and undervalued group of students here tonight. I say underappreciated. The great David Foster Wallace tells the story like this. He says there are two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over and says, "What the hell is water?" I think we've forgotten. For 2 years, we've lived in the water of these narratives. I think part of it is that these stories are about COVID, and nobody wants to drown in COVID experiences. All of us want to believe we are past those feelings of being shaken and tossed and all but lost. These are stories of gasping for breath, and now that we can exhale, we don't think about it. But really, I think part of it is that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about because we are surrounded by it. This is water. So let me be clear to the audience, but especially to the authors here tonight, when I say, you changed everything. You changed this town. For a brief time, the day that we published The Second Wave, which was the second volume of COVID Stories, The Class of COVID-19 was the number 3 best-selling memoir on Amazon. Number 1 was by Michelle Obama. Number 2 was by Anne Frank. Number 3 was by the students here tonight. These students were interviewed and featured on NBC News, CNN, People Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, New Jersey 101.5, The Star Ledger, The Bergen Record. A streaming service asked if they could do a documentary on us. Microsoft put us in a museum. At last count, the class of COVID-19 has sold thousands of copies in over 50 countries and territories around the world. I have received emails from teachers that tell me it is being taught as part of the curriculum at schools in New York City, and New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts, and Virginia, and California. 3 congressmen have celebrated you. One congressman, the great Bill Pascrell, demanded to write in the second volume. Both senators, New Jersey's Cory Booker and Menendez, have written us letters of praise. Governor Phil Murphy went on TV to talk about our book. In January, the President of the United States of America wrote a letter to Cliffside Park and said this to the student authors: "I cannot wait to write the next great chapter of the American story with you." Last year, and this still blows my mind, last year a girl in Pennsylvania read our book and turned Grace's story into a play like it was the life of Alexander Hamilton, because it is. Grace wrote in her story that she won't be remembered in any history books, but she's wrong. She will be, you all will be. And anytime anyone ever wants to know about this time in history, they will read your names. And as long as they read your names, they will know your resilience and your fortitude and your beauty. Hundreds of thousands of students have passed through the halls of this high school, and in all that time, 72 of them have ever done something so monumental that they got their own Wikipedia page. 68 of them are the authors of these volumes. You are the very best this town has ever produced, and never let anyone forget it. I wrote to the girl who turned Grace's story into a play, and she said this. She said, whether she knew it or not, whether she can appreciate it or not, whether they realize it or not, in a time of sickness and death and fear and loss, your students reached across the divide of social isolation and said to an entire generation, although we don't know each other, I think like you. Although we've never met, I feel the things you feel and care about the things you care about, even though most people don't. You are not alone. In one of the interviews I did for the book, I got misquoted. And what they wrote, I said, was, people will listen if you make them. And that's not true. You're going to find that most people in the world don't care, but never, ever, ever stop trying to make them. Be audacious. Remember that when the world didn't know whether to cry or give up, you stood and said, this is me, this is my story, I'm the hero here, and you did it all before you turned 18. In The Plague, Albert Camus writes this. He writes, Dr. Rieu resolved to compile this chronicle so that he should not be one of those who hold their peace, but should bear witness in favor of those plague-stricken people. so that some memorial of the injustice and outrage done them might endure, and to state quite simply what we learn in times of pestilence. There are more things to admire in men than to despise. That's you. You are what there is in men to admire. Not one man or a group of men, but in all mankind, you are what there is to admire, and I honor you each by name. Layla Abdelkader, Wilbert, Roca Alvarez, Carla Paz, Juliana Baldwin, Julia Darwish, Anella Deljanis, Angie L. DeCock, Ata Erdel, Megan Foro, Zina Hassan, Narid Harsarjian, Elena Coro, Mona Lucia, Melanie Mercado, Ruby Oyana, Grace Jared Scott, Zunaira Rizwan,